The fastest laptop you can buy in 2026 doesn't come from Apple. It doesn't come from Dell. It comes from a company most people completely overlooked, and it weighs less than a bag of sugar. That's not a hot take, that's a benchmark score. For the last few years, Apple has owned this conversation. The M series chips were genuinely impressive, and the laptop world was playing catch-up. But something shifted in 2026, and if you're still assuming the MacBook Air is the automatic answer, you might want to sit with this one for a few minutes. Because ASUS just released the Zenbook A16, built on the Qualcomm Snapdragon X2 Elite Extreme, and the numbers it puts up are not close. Let's start with the reason this video exists. The Snapdragon X2 Elite Extreme inside the Zenbook A16 posts a Geekbench 6 multi-core score of 22,978. The Apple M4, which powers the current MacBook Air, scores around 15,000 in the same test. The Intel Core Ultra chips inside the Dell XPS 16 sit somewhere in the middle depending on configuration. In Cinebench 2024 multi-core, the Zenbook hits 1,490. That's not a productivity laptop number. That's closer to what you'd expect from a machine with active cooling and a fan spinning loud enough to hear across the room. Except this one barely makes a sound. Single-core performance is where Apple has traditionally held its ground, and that's still true. The M4 is strong in single-core tasks, but multi-core is where real-world workloads live, rendering, exporting, compiling, running multiple applications at once, and in that category, the Snapdragon X2 Extreme doesn't just win, it dominates. What that means in practice is that tasks that used to take a few minutes on an Intel machine, a Premiere Pro export, a Lightroom catalog sync, a large zip compression, finish noticeably faster here. Not marketing faster, actually faster. Now, raw power only matters if the rest of the machine can keep up with it. So let's talk about what you're actually looking at all day. The Zenbook A runs a 16-inch OLED panel at 2880 by 1800. That's 3K resolution in a 16:10 aspect ratio, which gives you meaningfully more vertical screen space than a 16:9 machine. The refresh rate is 120 Hz adaptive, which means scrolling and motion feel smooth without draining the battery when you're just reading. Peak HDR brightness hits 1100 nits, and color accuracy is measured at a delta E of 0.62. For context, anything under 1.0 is considered imperceptible to the human eye. The display covers 100% of DCI-P3 color space, which makes it legitimately useful for photo and video work, not just a marketing checkbox. Compare that to the MacBook Air 15, which runs a 60 Hz liquid retina display. Solid screen, no question, but 60 Hz in 2026 on a $1,500 plus laptop is starting to feel like a deliberate limitation. The one honest caveat, the OLED panel is glossy and it reflects. Outdoors or near a window, you'll notice it. That's the trade-off you accept for OLED blacks and that color accuracy, but it's worth knowing going in. But here's where it gets interesting. A great screen on a heavy laptop is just a beautiful anchor. So let's talk about what this thing actually weighs. The Zenbook A16 does something very unusual for a 16-inch laptop. It weighs 1.2 kilograms. That's 2.65 pounds. The MacBook Air 15 weighs 1.5 kilograms. I thought this was supposed to be as light as air. The Samsung Galaxy Book 6 Edge, also a 16-inch Snapdragon machine just released, weighs 1.55 kilograms. The Dell XPS 16 sits at 1.65 kilograms. This laptop is lighter than most 14-inch machines in its performance class, and it has a 16-inch screen. That combination doesn't really exist anywhere else right now. If you travel with a laptop, work from different locations, or just carry a bag that your back eventually has to answer for, that difference is real. 300 grams sounds like nothing until it's been in your bag 5 days a week for a year. The chassis is built from what ASUS calls ceraluminum, a ceramic aluminum composite that feels more like a high-end consumer device than a traditional laptop. Smooth, stone-like texture, resistant to scratches. It's a material choice that makes the weight feel intentional rather than cheap. One thing to note, the lid has some flex when pressed. Not a deal breaker, but if you're traveling with it, a sleeve is a smart move. When it comes to battery, a fast laptop that dies at 2 p.m. is useless. You might as well get an Etch-a-Sketch. A 70-watt 3 kWh battery sounds modest for a machine pulling this kind of performance. You'd expect it to drain fast. It doesn't. In XDA's video playback testing, it ran for 25 hours. Real-world usage with a mix of productivity tasks and light browsing puts it more in the 10 to 15-hour range depending on what you're doing. Heavy CPU load, sustained rendering, large exports drains it faster, as it does on every machine. But the baseline is strong. You won't be hunting for a charger during a normal workday, and that's the only number that actually matters. The charger is 130 watts USB-C, and the laptop charges through 2 USB-C ports. One delivers 93 watts and the other 54 watts. So if charge speed matters to you, use the one closest to the body. This is where a lot of ultra-portable laptops quietly disappoint you. You get 2 USB-C ports, a marketing sheet full of promises, and a drawer full of adapters at home. The Zenbook A16 doesn't do that. You get 2 USB 4 ports, one USB-A 3.2, HDMI 2.1, a full-size SD card reader at SD 4.0, and a 3.5mm audio jack. Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.4 handle wireless. For photographers and video shooters, that SD 4.0 slot is quietly one of the best features on this machine. Most laptops in this tier either skip the card reader or include a slower SD 3.0 slot that creates a bottleneck you don't notice until you're importing a 64GB card. The keyboard has 1.3mm of key travel with a standalone arrow cluster, something a lot of slim laptops sacrifice for aesthetics, and the touchpad is large, centered, and accurate. It's noticeably better than what you get on the Galaxy Book 6 Edge.
If you're enjoying this and finding it useful, hit the like button and make sure you subscribe, because I drop weekly, no BS reviews of the latest and coolest gadgets that matter to you the most. Now, there's something that needs addressing, because it's the reason a lot of people hesitated on Snapdragon laptops in 2023 and 2024. Windows on ARM had a compatibility problem. Certain apps wouldn't run. Certain games crashed. Some software just looked at the processor and walked away. In 2026, that situation has improved substantially. Most productivity apps, Office, Chrome, the Adobe Suite, Zoom, run natively or through emulation without visible issues. The Zenbook A16 runs Cyberpunk 2077 at around 62 frames per second in Steam Deck mode at 10,180p. Doom at 1440p hits 67 frames per second. This is not a gaming laptop, and nobody is pitching it as one, but those are real numbers on a 2.65-pound machine. There are still some games that won't launch. Batman Arkham Knight is one example. Some apps need driver updates for optimal performance, and Wi-Fi has produced intermittent disconnect issues on certain network setups, though a reboot resolves it. Real quirks, worth knowing, but not deal breakers for the audience this machine is built for. The Zenbook A16 starts at $1,700 for the Snapdragon X2 Elite Extreme configuration at Best Buy. The higher spec variant with Windows 11 Pro and a slightly lighter build is $2,000 through the ASUS store. That's premium pricing, but when you stack it against the MacBook Air 15 at a similar price point, or the Galaxy Book 6 Edge, or the Dell XPS 16, the Zenbook A16 is lighter than all of them, faster than most of them, and has a more complete port selection than any of them. If you're a professional who moves between locations, a creator who needs real processing power in something that fits in a slim bag, or someone who's been on the fence about whether Windows on ARM is finally ready, this is the machine that answers that question. If you're deep in the Apple ecosystem and everything you own talks to your iPhone, the MacBook Air M4 is still a great laptop. This isn't about tearing that down. It's about knowing there's now a legitimate alternative that beats it on raw performance, beats it on weight, and matches it on battery life.